بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to, um, uh, we're 3 minutes past the hour, so I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly Ummatics Colloquium, inshallah. As I mentioned earlier, for those who are الذين يريدون أن يستمعوا باللغة العربية إن شاء الله، عندكم في لوحة التحكم يمكنكم أن تختاروا الترجمة إلى اللغة العربية إن شاء الله. So I will be speaking in English, but the main speakers will be speaking in Arabic, and their speeches, which will start in just a moment, will be translated on a channel in English, which you can find on the sort of panel at the bottom of the screen, where it's called interpretation. So inshallah, we'll be please switch between those according to who is the main speaker for the language that you are after, inshallah. So once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, to our respected audience, and we'd like to welcome you to our monthly Ummatics Colloquium. The Ummatics Colloquium aims to stir new ideas around the questions of what does and should Ummatic unity look like, and how should we go about realizing it. To this end, we focus on specific themes that come under the categories of identity, people, and social movements, in addition to the state, regional concerns, and international levels of analysis. This colloquium looks at the global level of change and discusses the Ummah as a unit and a level of analysis, as well as activism in international relations. Then we delve into applications and possible opportunities for the effectiveness of the Ummah on the international stage. Our first speaker is Dr. Nadia Mostafa, who is a professor of international relations at Cairo University. She is founder and president of the Center for Civilizational Studies and Research. She is a leading figure in the Islamic Civilizational Paradigm in international relations, where she has been publishing and leading research efforts for over 4 decades. Dr. Nadia has authored more than 17 books, in addition to editing and co-editing more than 40 volumes, including the My Umma in the World book series and the International Relations in a Changing World encyclopedia. She has also published around 55 papers in Arab and international journals, and presented about 111 papers at academic conferences and seminars, and supervised over 40 master's and doctoral theses. She is the recipient of numerous Arab and international awards. Our second speaker is Dr. Medhat Maher, the director of the Center for Civilizational Studies and Research. He holds master's degrees at Cairo University with a thesis entitled The Reality of Jurisprudence in Islamic Political Heritage, Jurisprudential, Philosophical, and Social Models. His doctoral dissertation was entitled The Equation of Power, Interest, Ethics, and Law in International Politics, Theory and Application from Comparative Paradigms. And Dr. Medhat is the author of numerous academic publications that engage his political and the Sharia academic backgrounds with the pressing issues of the Ummah. Most recently, he's leading a serious effort to analyze and engage with the current war on Gaza on a macro and micro level. As noted already, our speakers will be giving their presentations in Arabic, and in the presence of live interpretation. So please use the control panel underneath to switch between languages according to what is needed. كما ذكرنا ستلقى المحاضرات إن شاء الله بالعربية، فالذين يريدون السماع إلى ذلك ينتقلون إلى لغتهم المختارة إن شاء الله بين الخيارين الموجودة إن شاء الله تعالى. So with that, I would like to welcome دكتورة نادية مصطفى. فلتتفضل مشكورة.
Thank you, Dr. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you, Ummatics Institute, for inviting me to this lecture. Thank you, Dr. Osama, for this introduction. And I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Amira Abu Samra, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science, for overtaking the mission of translation into English. And I sincerely hope that this meeting that I'm honored to attend would be providing enough support, appropriate support, from those who have believed in the idea of the Ummah to support our brothers and sisters in Palestine and in Gaza and the West Bank, especially these days. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The topic of this lecture is crucial and vital. As the timing and title indicate, this lecture moves from current events taking place in Palestine, the heart of the Ummah, to the current concerns of the Ummah in our contemporary world. Our argument is that the Ummah is always present, yet its presence and effectiveness are constantly put to the test. While some are declaring the death of the Ummah and the death of its central cause, the Palestinian cause, and some were asserting that the Ummah had never existed in the first place, prideful Gaza, its resistance movement, and its people turned down all doubts. With the flood of Al-Aqsa ongoing for 50 days so far, Gaza has upheld the values of a present and active Muslim Ummah before the eyes of the world. The Ummah has always existed in divine revelations, in prophetic construction, in the rightly guided caliphate system, in the experiences of successive Muslim caliphates, even since the fall of the caliphate system and up until now. The Ummah, as Mona Abu al-Fadl describes it, is that distinctive collective entity that has been the product of Islamic doctrine and da'wah, that's to say, the call to Islam. Its components converge around common characteristics, are deeply rooted with extended branches covering the subjective and the objective, the moral and the material dimensions of a group that is the backbone of the Muslim world. In other words, the destiny of the Ummah is inseparable from the path of Dawah. Unlike other nations or Ummahs, this Ummah lasts as long as its doctrine lasts. In that sense, the Ummah has performed the functions of either being a witness Ummah or a witnessed Ummah at the center of global interactions throughout its history. It has been a witness whenever in possession of a strong civilizational construct, power, deterrence, and unity, and whenever persistently pursuing justice and Islamic ethics. The Ummah is still today at the center of global interactions, but as a witness Ummah, with a weakened civilizational construct. It is vulnerable, fragmented, and ruled by regimes failing to uphold its Sharia and system of values. Hence, the Ummah on the one hand, and Islam and Muslims on the other, are two sides of the same coin. The Ummah is balanced by the message of Islam, and the bearers of this message are Muslims. The Ummah is simply the world community of Muslims. The Ummah's active and effective existence has been tested through the ages. Since the beginning of the Islamic call to all worlds, the Ummah has existed not as a mere abstract idea, but as an existing reality that expands and includes peoples and tribes from the East and West, wherever the doctrine of monotheism and the Sharia system exists. This existence can only be truly grasped by someone who possesses a strategic civilizational perspective, as our professors Hamid Rabi' and Mona Abu al-Fadl did. The Ummah was always present in the civilizational strife in our Egyptian and Arab universities. This is what they told us. Dr. Hamid Rabi', in the words of Dr. Saif Abdel Fattah, in the first issue of the periodic book My Ummah in the World, published by our center, used the possessive pronoun my to talk about the Ummah, always referring to my Ummah in the world. Rabia, while reflecting on the vocation of the scholar in the Ummah, argued that the scholar has to openly announce his bias to the issues and concerns of the Ummah and to proudly declare his sense of belonging, looking for still surviving Muslim ideas and practices and searching for the necessities of revival and renewal and the cross. He deeply anchored the Ummah into our consciences, allowing and always stressing that the Ummah would never die, as it carried its own elements of self-renewal, even touching upon the equations of the power of weakness and the arrogance of strength. He understood, as no one else did, the necessary formula for overcoming the Ummah's current state of weakness. He carefully described the problems and solutions, always suggesting how to translate the will into an awareness and a practical quest for a change that eliminates all the negative factors that weaken the Ummah and strengthens all the positive factors. My previous words imply a bias towards my Ummah's existence, presence, and effectiveness. No matter how many attacks, calamities, and crises it has been exposed to over the past 15 years. But existence and presence have signs and foundations. What are they? Please follow the remaining part of the lecture for following. For following is an intellectual reflection from a civilizational Islamic paradigm of international relation. A reflection that begins with reality, moves to the origins, history, and thought, then brings us back to reality. The reality of life and reality of science. When we talk about reality, we see two simultaneous scenes that I use to introduce the idea. The first scene, this year marks 100 years since the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate, the last and longest Islamic Caliphate. The Ummah, as peoples, systems, and states, has so far survived without a caliphate system. During this century, Muslims have been widely attacked, first in Palestine, then in East Turkestan, in Kashmir, Chechnya, in Bosnia, in Afghanistan, and in Kosovo. Second scene, the flood of Al-Aqsa. Since 50 days, the flood of Al-Aqsa has been led by the prideful Gaza resistance movement and people fighting the battle in the name of the Ummah, in defense of the doctrine of this Ummah and its land, Palestine. This scene tests the presence and effectiveness of the Ummah and highlights two facts. First, the peoples of this Ummah, wherever they are, have Gaza and Palestine in their hearts. In Gaza and its resistance see the revival of the Ummah across the world, across the Muslim world. Next to them stand all the free people of the world, not only Arabs and Muslims, but all those who speak against the unjust and corrupt support of Zionists. The second fact is the presence of the ruling political regimes of these peoples, and that this presence has been ineffective, failing to support the central doctrinal cause in the face of the racist settlement in the land of Palestine and the genocide of the Muslim and Christian population. The pathetic presence of these regimes has been justified by pretexts of balances of power and the protection of national interests and security. Letting down the oppressed. These two scenes provide clear indication about the nature of the current presence of the Ummah. as a level of analysis, as a perspective to reflect on our reality. The Ummah is present at the center of global interactions. Its presence is proven by the different functions that the members of the Ummah perform: armed jihad, desert jihad, loyalty, support, and so on. Hence, the Ummah is present and active, even without the existence of supporting ruling regimes. The effective presence of the Ummah is dependent on the existence of strong and just states. To sum up, the Ummah exists without a caliphate system. The Ummah does not go away. It carries the elements of its permanence and survival. This is the lesson that we learn from the flood of Al-Aqsa for the past 50 days. My second point in this intellectual endeavor relates to the grounds for understanding the position of the Ummah in the world, its existence and presence from an Islamic civilizational perspective. Let's ask ourselves how each one of us has become aware of the existence of the Ummah and of being part of it. How each of us has begun to wonder what to do to contribute to the effectiveness of this inclusive entity and why. Certainly, answers vary and approaches are multiple, but in their entirety, they are of a doctrinal, jurisprudential, historical, intellectual, theoretical, practical, or realistic nature. Talking about the existence of the Ummah and its presence is possible because of all of this, and the experience of the school of the civilizational Islamic paradigm is just but one contemporary example, proving the presence of the Ummah in our consciousness and perception, and in our real world and in our knowledge production. There are many proving grounds for the existence and presence of the Ummah in the world: epistemological, foundational, historical, intellectual, theoretical, and systemic. These include fixed Quranic grounds that provide the conceptual and existential foundations of the Ummah, other foundational grounds derived from the prophetic legacy and the experience of the rightly guided caliphs, the experiences throughout the extended Islamic history with its multiple punctures that indicate the evolution of the rise and fall of the Ummah in the world, as well as intellectual grounds that are found in the contributions of the pioneers of the Islamic civilization from all over the Ummah, across time, space, and major events in the history of Islam. So many names have contributed to this intellectual richness, which is worth paying attention to, especially during the last century, modern history. The Ummah's intellectual product, which is not only confined to the thought of the prominent thinkers of Muslim heritage, but also includes multiple individual symbols spread geographically over the past century. And this product is very important because it provides us with reflections on the contemporary state of the Ummah in the world. A careful reading of these intellectual models reveals many things that are at the heart of our current perception of the existence and presence of the Ummah. How was a Muslim civilization built? How did it rise and decline? And how is it resisting in order to rise again? How the experiences of the peoples of the Ummah differ in a way that creates integration, plurality, and diversity, but under a common doctrinal and civilizational bond that constitutes the heart core of the existence of this Ummah. And the most important thing is how to be in our universities and various arenas not detached from our Ummah in the world, better speaking, our Ummah and the world. Under all of the pressures that we are experiencing and that is experiencing. Dr. Mona Abul Fadl, my professor, may God rest her soul, reflects on the Ummah as the mother of all collective entities known to this civilizational region and considers it to be the task of the Muslim researcher to turn the Ummah from a mere object of study into an analytical concept, to raise the Ummah from the level of emotions to the level of perceptions, and to rationalize our feeling and transform unconscious emotions into conscious voluntary interaction. While limiting our conscious voluntary behavior by those guidelines that maintain its moral character, without which no civilizational development of human beings is conceivable. Therefore, the foundational contribution of Mona Abul Fadl on the Ummah stems from the belief that pinpointing the importance of the Ummah is one possible way of solving the problem of identity and belonging, and one valid approach to discussing issues of governance, political systems, and Islamic international relations. Therefore, her foundational contribution rejects treating the Ummah as obsolete because the Ummah has a lasting responsibility to carry and a civilizational function to perform towards the whole of humanity. Counselor al-Bishri, who encouraged us to publish My Ummah in the world, and who has always given us support and consultation for more than 25 years, taught us that colonialism hit the bonds of the Ummah as well as the awareness of its existence. As a level of analyzing our problems and understanding our belonging. That's why there is a need to renew awareness of the contemporary existence of the Ummah and the significance of its intellectual, cultural, and political historical experiences in the face of the challenges of modern colonialism, before and after the end of the material occupation, and the effect colonialism had on the values, structures, and elements of the strength of this Ummah. The renewed awareness of the Ummah's existence and presence is the basis for its civilizational independence, without which neither political independence or any other kind of independence is conceivable. Dr. Saif Abdel Fattah provided us with his seven-fold set of pillars of an Islamic civilizational paradigm of international relations: the elevating doctrine, the motivating sharia, governing values, the preserving purposes, maqasid, the conditional sunan, eternal divine laws, the inclusive ummah, and the active civilization. Ismail al-Faruqi compared the Western world community in its historical development to the global community of Islam and Muslims in a way that shows how reforming the world order and building a new world order depends on the revival of the Pax Islamic value system. Ahmad Davutoglu also mentioned that Western civilization is in need of reform and renewal. This is impossible from within Western civilization alone. The Muslim Ummah, by reforming itself, can contribute to the Islamic value system to reform humanity and the world. Mustafa Kemal Pasha said that the civilizational perspective on the Ummah in the world could help overcome two main obstacles. First, the very negative perception prevailing in the West of Muslims, and second, the sense of inferiority and self-doubt that is evident in large areas of the Muslim world. Muslims' perception of themselves in the world as an Ummah is a key to change based on equality and parity, and to an assessment of the relationship between the Ummah, the civilization, and the state. The civilizational perspective of Muslims as an Ummah is by itself an element of civilizational strength. That's because a civilization is a component of power, not just a framework for thinking about it or about international relations. Among the conclusions of reading these various intellectual models are the following. Changing the conditions of our Ummah in the world in order to restore its active witness presence and get rid of the causes of its subordinate witness presence requires a change in the positivist view of the world for the broad normative civilizational that calls upon the Ummah to overcome the realist positivist political constrained by the nation state. Participation in global change for a more just and free world is the duty of the Ummah in a way that evokes a new equation of politics, combining the elements of material power and the system of humane civilizational values. The flood of Al-Aqsa has been a test of these two ideas. By looking into the revival of the Western conscious, the global conscious, and the attack on the Zionist settlement, and reflecting on the importance of a value system of sacrifice and resistance and dignity. This foundational theorizing of the Ummah from an Islamic frame of reference suggests a new level of analysis compared to the traditional and mainstream levels of analysis, the international system of nation states, that emanate from another epistemological model and another worldview, which is the modern secular positivist realist model. Our school intersects with Western critical schools, all of which cast doubt on the universality and credibility of the international system as the main level of analysis, and advocate considering and reflecting on other existing and effective levels that call for so-called civilizational analysis, civilizational value system, and their effects on international policies, global society, global community, global civil society. Egyptian School of the Civilizational Paradigm in International Relations has contributed foundational theoretical efforts to bring the Ummah to the scientific study of international relations with the aim of developing useful science. Our school intersects with Western critical schools, casting doubt about the universality or on the universality and credibility of the international system, as said. We're not talking about states only, we're talking about peoples, and the civilizational analysis and the civilizational value systems are important to call upon when reflecting on international politics. Now we have ongoing debates at the international level, and these revolve around the following: the relationship between the Muslim Ummah and the nation state, the relationship between the Islamic value system, including values of support and loyalty, and national interests, national security, the relationship between the protection of national borders and the right of the peoples of the Ummah to freedom of movement, and to support each other, to be free to support each other, the relationship between balances of power and the protection of rights, the power of right versus might is right. relationship between the international status quo and the cost of resisting injustice and bringing about change. The relationship between global hegemony, its arrogance, and its global power on the one hand, and the rights of vulnerable people to self-determination and civilizational independence on the other. While realists prefer dichotomous ways of thinking in IR, the civilizational perspective seeks to overcome these dichotomous ways of thinking about international relations. Therefore, we have to identify restraints on the existence and presence of the Ummah and to think about ways to activate its presence. The Ummah is not an idealist cause, but an existing economic and political reality in the Muslim world. Encountering so many challenges, the effective activation of this existence requires entities and elements of material power that translate faith and belief into a discourse and actions that cherish the values of monotheism, prosperity, and self-righteousness. There are rules, foundations, and principles that guide relations between the Ummah and other Ummah or nations. These include diversity, pluralism, acquaintance, dialogue, counter-checking each other, dialogue, jihad, and da'wah. There are rules, foundations, and principles that guide the relations between the various components of the Ummah: loyalty, support, solidarity, and others. The message of the Ummah to the world is a call for an Islamic system of values and its purposes with the goal of bringing about global change towards a more just, free, and humane world. Neither a single caliph nor multiple caliphs are the magical solution to prove the existence of the Ummah. Yet, and without overemphasizing the importance of the state, just and strong systems are necessary conditions for the effective functioning of the Ummah. The failure of weak and corrupt regimes to support the Ummah does not debilitate the Ummah, and it is the origin, and they are just sub-entities. The civilizational leadership has been rotating between the peoples of the Ummah through the ages, and the external does not dominate or become difficult to defeat except when internal weakness sets in first. This is a lesson drawn from history. Neither the whole West nor the whole East are enemies of the Ummah. The Muslim value system indeed intersects with the value systems of other nations in the world, especially when it comes to resisting global arrogance and respecting human dignity. The Ummah is not a closed entity claiming doctrinal or civilizational superiority and standing in hostility to the rest of the world, but it is an Ummah with a mission towards other nations and the world. This relationship has its guidelines, has said acquaintance, dialogue, counter-checking, and rotation, neither unilateralism nor exclusion. The Ummah should not only be present to address the issues of Muslims or face the challenges and threats that confront them alone, but it must be present for the sake of humanity and the vulnerable everywhere. Globalization is a friend of the Ummah that carries tools that serve its presence and effectiveness. Not an enemy of the Ummah. Has tools of empowerment. The media war served the war on the ground. And finally, last word, the recurring Zionist aggression against Palestine and the Battle of the Al-Aqsa flood are nothing but revealing historical junctures. Like previous junctures, pinpointing the ills of the Ummah and also the consciences of pride and resistance. Gaza, its resistance movement, and its people are not victims, but they are symbols of the resistance and steadfastness of Ummah for the sake of the doctrine and rights. the resistance and steadfastness of the whole Ummah. They have successfully erased the image of Islamic terrorism in the minds of the free people of the world, some of whom we've seen demonstrating in the squares of the capitals of the West, to whom the image of the Zionist state's terrorism, racism, and barbarism became obvious. Gaza succeeded in showing that the revival of the Ummah lies in the continued resistance. However, the effectiveness of the Ummah in the hoped for victory has been prevented by many detriments, as we will see with our dear colleague, Dr. Medhat. He will discuss in detail these several detriments to the effective agency of the Ummah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
جزاكم الله خيرا دكتورة نادية. الآن ندعو دكتور مدحت إن شاء الله فليتفضل مشكورا إن شاء الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
In the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you, and welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I deeply thank the Ummatics Institute for inviting me to this important event and for allowing me to participate with my dear professor and mentor, Dr. Nadia Mostafa, this session titled Our Ummah in Global Politics, From Presence to Effectiveness. I will start from where Professor Nadia left off. And I thank her for this solid intellectual and theoretical foundation that she provided us with, in which she brought together a deep understanding of reality and epistemological, intellectual, and historical foundational perspective of the Ummah's presence in international and global politics. Our professor referred to the contemporary scientific debate on the presence of the level of the Ummah in global theorizing and analysis, and she brilliantly distinguished between the existence of the Ummah, its presence, and its effectiveness. Its existence is an indisputable fact, and its presence is subject to scientific and intellectual controversy, but the agency of the Ummah is mainly a practical problem. This is what I will be tackling in this part of the session on the agency of the Ummah in global politics. I will address in my presentation three central points: the concept of agency in global politics from a civilizational perspective, that's to say at the level of research and analysis, then the manifestations of the Ummah's agency in contemporary global politics, and the problems this agency faces. And finally, I will suggest some keys to future effective agency as a part of a strategic civilizational perspective. This approach to the topic is quite broad in scope, the Ummah and the world, and therefore it will rely on rather general and holistic formulations dictated by a strategic civilizational perspective, yet without omitting details to clarify and substantiate for the main argument. The basic premise of this presentation is that the Muslim Ummah functions as a global actor in contemporary global politics through a multitude of actors to represent. However, a number of obstacles stand in the way of the Ummah's effectiveness. Chief among them is the stark contrast that exists between the political, official, and the popular civilizational in the most powerful parts of the Ummah. Effectively directing civilizational action besieges the petrified politician and pressures him to change his positions with time as the demands of belonging and its entitlement become apparent. However, this process will always witness forms of intra and inter-conflicts that will constantly be exploited and fueled by external actors. The first point relates to the global effectiveness from a strategic civilizational perspective. In connection with the words of our professor, may God reward her, I move directly from the concept of presence to the concept of effectiveness, specifically global effectiveness from a strategic civilizational perspective. For language considerations, I point out that I'm using the concept فاعلية of agency from agent, not effective from effectiveness. Global effectiveness is the ability of the global actor to achieve external goals and influence the global arena, while the agency I'm talking about refers to the ability to act in the international arena to confirm presence and get rid of the state of being a mere object. On the other hand, this means that agency is the initial step towards effectiveness. Just to get rid of a state of being an object over the past centuries. This gradual movement is justified by the Ummah's state in real life and the fact that it has been witnessing for 2 centuries a state of being an object in world politics. So how does the Ummah become a global agent from a theoretical perspective? This requires much more than a narrow political perspective. This requires a strategic civilizational perspective. The Ummah is a broad and profound formation, comprising many states and non-state formations, large, medium, and small. The Ummah here is a civilizational actor that is not a purely political actor. Looking at the world and global politics from a civilizational perspective and at a strategic level would not be just dividing the globe into more than 190 countries, hundreds of giant companies that drag the global economy, hundreds of thousands of subsidiaries, hundreds of international organizations and institutions, and thousands of transnational civil organizations, or even recognizing it's more than 8 billion people, 1.3 billion of whom live in more developed countries, and 6.7 billion of whom live in less developed countries, according to the estimates by the United Nations Population Division in July 2023. It's not just enough to follow up with these statistics and population counts. For whether we are communitarian, cosmopolitan, or a combination of both, what is global today far transcends the international. We live in a global society with an international society at its heart. The World Wide Web creates a more open, free, and connected global arena and offers unprecedented opportunities. Giving non-state actors huge opportunities and huge chances. About 3 billion of the world's population have a Facebook account. 2.5 billion are subscribers on YouTube. 2 billion people use WhatsApp. Another 2 billion are on Instagram. 1 billion subscribers are on TikTok, and so on and so forth. And the incident or the TikTok between the US and China tells how significant these arenas are. They communicate individually and collectively, expressing themselves, their companies, their currents, their states, and the nations to which they belong. This is a new reality that affects the Ummah. In Cairo on September 9th and 10th, the 34th International Conference of the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs was held under the title Cyberspace and Modern Means of Religious Discourse Between Rational Use and Divides from the Past. All of you definitely witnessed the presence and agency of the Ummah's youth in the global interaction taking place on the Palestinian coast and the ongoing war conducted through the global network and virtual means of communication in a way quite similar to the real-life division existing around the coast. It's as if the world is divided around this coast. Therefore, the Ummah, as our professor explained, is a macro platform, a broad framework for actors who represent it, not an actor unit similar to the nation state. It's a holistic macro platform of agency. The Ummah exercises its complete agency through an unconfined number of practices carried out by multiple actors at the global level: states, regimes, governments, organizations, institutions, companies, projects, even individuals who are enrolled in active groups who represent different intellectual currents. As a result, various global processes can be identified: religious advocacy, raising awareness and education, intellectual debates, financial spending and money transfer, human mobility, economic movement, political pressure and debate, civil activism, and many others. This calls for a civilizational perspective and a strategic perspective in line with the global transformations taking place in global politics and the developments of science, including the discipline of international relations. We see the Ummah as an agent acting internationally. Global actors who express the agency. An Ummah with a vast area, 25% of the land area on Earth, that is divided geopolitically and demographically between 5 major regions or formations: the Far East, South and Southeast Asia, Central Asia and the Muslims of Russia, the Middle East, the Arab nation, Iran and Turkey, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Muslim groups and formations scattered around the world across its different parts and continents. These regions and formations can be redefined in different ways, especially because they are geographically interconnected. Most of the Muslim world, the Ummah, is located in the global south, the less developed global south, but the number of Muslims in the global north is also increasing from one day to another. Their voices are getting louder and their presence more visible. At the end of the century, the Civilization Center produced an important 6-volume publication titled The Ummah in a Century, which is quite useful to read. The first volume included important studies on the concept of Ummah over a century, the potentials of the Ummah, a holistic perspective on the potential capabilities and the current agency, the population of the Muslim world in the 20th century, military capabilities and capacities in the Muslim world, provided a holistic perspective on how to count the capabilities and capacities of the Muslim world. It also included important studies on the economic potentials of the Muslim world, comparing the characteristics of reality to the requirements of the Islamic economy, in addition to a statistical appendix on the indicators of economic development in the Muslim world, appendices to introduce the OIC countries and some significant maps. The conclusion of these important studies is that the Ummah is indeed present and in possession of significant agency potential, but this agency is undermined by major challenges, including the doctrinal split, the national division, external intervention, and the imposition of dependence. The most important challenge to the Ummah's agency is the weak awareness of the Ummah among the masses and the absence of political will among the elites or the ruling elites. Of course, there are huge disparities within the Muslim world. So the actors who express the agency of the Ummah are not on equal footing, nor on the heart of one man, carrying varying degrees of awareness of the Ummah, knowledge of its components, a sense of belonging to the Ummah, a sense of responsibility towards it, also varying degrees of demographic, military, and economic capabilities, and varying degrees of the ability to actually engage in political politics through various channels. From a civilizational perspective, the conditions of the Ummah, its strategic culture, affect the conditions of the world, not only through the demographic, economic, and military powers and the vital interests associated with them, but also because the Ummah embodies civilizational interests, including restoring the influence of Sharia. And this is a part of its uniqueness as a civilizational body. Restoring the influence of Sharia, renewing the strength of the Islamic faith and civilizational identity, activating the network of inter-Islamic relations, and converting all of this into living economic and political interests, and an integrated military force that deters the enemies of the Ummah and defends its components and its causes. This is a particularity of the Muslim Ummah, that it has this ability to renew or create cultural renewal in our global politics. And it provides a different understanding of both that combines both material as well as non-material aspects in a way that distinguishes it from other entities. In this sense, the agency of the Ummah is possible and the capabilities for this agency in world politics are huge. But why is this agency failing to become a tangible, growing reality? Here I move to manifestations of the agency of the Ummah and the problems that accompany and hinder. Looking at the last 2 decades from a civilizational perspective and a strategic perspective, we notice a major contestation between the Ummah's orientation towards agency and the obstacles that hinder this agency, taking place at internal, external, and inter-Ummatic level. Looking at the 2 decades from a civilizational strategic perspective, we notice a major contestation, for example, between the Ummah's orientation. For example, we see several parts of the Ummah came back to life with the end of the Cold War and the independence from the Soviet Union in the 90s of the last century. Islamic solidarity was obvious during Bosnian and Chechen attempts to gain independence. The Israeli manipulation of the Palestinian cause, the 2000 Intifada Al-Aqsa Intifada erupted at the beginning of the new century in response to the desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque.
هي الانتفاضة الثانية انتفاضة الأقصى انتظرت شعلة كما يحدث الآن لتدنيس يعني أحد قادة إسرائيل المسجد الأقصى.
The Intifada was interrupted by September 11, which gave the United States the opportunity to relegate the cause to a whole decade.
التفت الولايات المتحدة من ورائها الصهيونية على قضية فلسطين ووضعتها في الثلاجة حتى يومنا حتى
even until very recently. Also, the first decade of the 21st century witnessed the Ummah's steadfastness in the face of the American war against conducted under the guise of a global war on terror since 2001.
عن هذه الفترة أعداد، لكن من أهمها أنه طرح في هذا الوقت طرح خطير جدا وظهرت مقاومة المسلمين له، هو محاولة إصلاح الإسلام باسم إصلاح
Muslims were even resisting at the beginning of the century attempts at reforming Islam, a very dangerous cause.
من الأهمية بمكان. العقد الأول من القرن الذي نعيشه شهد
The first decade of the 21st century witnessed resistance by the Ummah. And several parts of the Arab and Muslim world, as well as massive Islamic charity and others, showed resilience in the face of a horrific wave of Islamophobia in the West itself. The Ummah did not give in to charges of terrorism.
استمر هذا الصمود والتمنع إلى أن في آخر هذا العقد الأول جاء الرئيس الأمريكي.
By the end of in 2009, Barack Obama came with an apology to the Muslim world, delivered first in Turkey and then in Cairo, asking Muslims to turn the page. So the result was that the American forces withdrew from Iraq in 2012 and from Afghanistan in a first scene that also in August 2021, letting the Taliban movement come back to power. And even Palestinians were not allowed to have their own state throughout that period. Peoples benefited from this pressure, external pressure, practiced in order to ask for reform. So the agency of Ummah is not moving into one direction, but it is shifting between different directions, sometimes becoming more powerful, sometimes less so.
يعني أريد أن أختصر قاومنا خلال العقد الأول والثاني.
So during the first and second decades of the 21st century, the Ummah resisted and provided very honorable models of civilizational resistance. But this was used against the Muslim Ummah, claiming that the Muslims are an aggressive nation, and even this was resisted. At the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century, Arab peoples placed the Ummah at the center of world politics during the Arab Spring. The revolutions produced promising models of revival and political change, but as Professor Nadia explains in an important study on revolutions and the international system, the international context did not allow the revolutions to succeed and encouraged counter-revolutions that have led to deteriorating conditions in the region.
وأيضا أن هذا السياق الدولي كان عاملا مسهما بشكل كبير جدا
It was obvious that the regional and the global context were not given enough attention, and they were supposed to be given enough attention for these revolutions to succeed. The success of economic development experiences the relative Islamic power of Malaysia, Iran, and Turkey, the development of conditions in the Gulf region and Bangladesh, and other important parts of the Muslim world had also their influences on the world stage. In the meantime, the private Islamic economy has been working across the globe and has been offering its own models and systems that are still progressing with some difficulty amid the imperialist and capitalist global economy. The past 2 decades, the Islamic civic presence has been growing in the West and the East, with rising Islamic manifestations across Australia, New Zealand, East Turkestan, and China, India, Europe, and so on, as well as a rising role for Islamic political movements in parliaments and then the governments of the Arab world. This was confronted with a broad, fierce Islamophobic campaign that relied on a cultural approach and accusations of extremism, fanaticism, and terrorism to restrict different forms of Muslim agency. This is how battles over the hijab, minarets, citizenship, immigration, and asylum laws have become so prominent. The periodic book My Umma in the World dedicated a special issue to post-Islamophobia, highlighting not only the consequences of Islamophobia, but also how it is being practiced within the Muslim world itself. The Agency of Islamic Governmental and Civic Institutions and Organizations acting globally has also been encountering the same obstacles mentioned above. Here I refer to religious institutions such as Al-Azhar, Fatwa institutions, advocacy and cultural associations, charity institutions, especially in the So, are there any keys to overcome this state of stagnation? How can this critical impasse be overcome, in which the Ummah is still standing, confronting the fierce obstacle? Similar to the propositions of the nationalist project in the 50s and 60s of the last century, there are 3 main propositions on how to overcome the obstacles impeding the agency of the Muslim Ummah, especially those related to the contestation between the political and civilizational aspects. One proposition is internal democracy first, in the hope that the ensuing construction, national power in Muslim countries could further advance the Ummah and protect its civilizational project and enhance its agency in global politics. This is a view adopted by the advocates of liberal thought and projects usually. One example usually cited in this case is the Turkish model, and less so the relatively different Malaysian model. The Arab revolutions were one attempt in this regard, but they failed. Some attribute this failure to the absence of the 2 following propositions, or at least one of them. However, the Arab revolutions have so clearly demonstrated that democracy cannot be achieved in Muslim countries, especially Arab countries, in isolation from regional and global contexts, and without considering the regional and global stances on the project of Islamic revival, generally speaking. Another proposition is the inter-Ummatic unity, and that it should come first. This is the project of the nationalist civilizationists and the project of those attached to the system of Caliph. The advocates of this project believe that weak freedom is worthless and that power through unity or integration is what makes political freedom into a tangible reality. The third position is independence and civilizational autonomy. This is a cultural project to renew the grounds of the political and redirect politicians towards a sense of belonging to the Ummah. It's an ambitious and exhausting project that faces constant restrictions and repeated blows as a part of the general project of revival of the Muslim Ummah. This brings us to the strategy of integration from a civilizational perspective, where we need a parallel, balanced, and mutually supportive path between all of these tracks, moving towards a civilizational, strategic culture that deepens awareness of the challenges confronting the Ummah and the keys to deal with them. Gaza today offers many answers to the question of civilizational agency in world politics: persistent resistance, miraculous steadfastness, broad support, global discord over universal human values, a multi-front war, military, political, media, moral, legal. It's the equation of power, interest, and morality that we have to look for. And thank you very much for your kind attention, and peace and mercy of God be upon you.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Medhat. I'm now switching to English, and so I believe Dr. Amira Abu Samra will be periodically coming in and translating for us. In my case, I'm quite happy to, inshallah, translate my own statements briefly. I'll try and keep brief. أنا الآن أتحول إلى اللغة الإنجليزية إن شاء الله، لكن في بعض الأحيان إذا كنت يعني أقوم بمداخلة سأترجم كذلك، لكن الدكتورة أميرة أبو سمرة جزاها الله خيرا ستقوم بالترجمة للأستاذين الحاضرين. بارك الله فيكم. So we would like to invite, inshallah, Jazakumullah khairan to both of you. It really has been a true pleasure to listen to your lectures, and we thank Dr. Amira for her wonderful translation, simultaneous translation. And we'd like to invite participants, inshallah, to present their questions. نجزي المحاضرين يعني جزيل الشكر على تقديم هذه المعلومات المهمة والأفكار الرائدة. جزاكم الله خيرا. إن شاء الله دكتورة أميرة ستقوم بترجمة أجوبتهم، لكن نحن ندعو المستمعين لكي يعني تكتبوا أسئلتهم إن شاء الله في يعني في ال Q&A يعني تحت. وجاء سؤال. There is one question which is already here, so I'll read the Arabic if this is okay, and I'll translate it, and inshallah we'll ask the two speakers to kindly respond. But again, I reiterate to the attendees, please feel free to put forward your questions. So the first question comes from Muhammad Dradkha. I'm not sure, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that. And it reads in Arabic: ما مؤشرات تعريف الأمة إجرائيا وكذلك الثقافة والحضارة وكيف تفعيلها عمليا؟ هل طرفكم يتقطع مع طرح هانتينغتون لصراع الحضارات؟ الدكتور هذا من دكتور محمد درادكا، أستاذ علوم السياسية بالأردن جامعة البيت. بارك الله فيكم. So the question is that, what are the main elements of the definition of the Ummah? And is the clash of civilizations or the notion of Samuel Huntington something that you take into consideration in your analysis? Yes, in the notion of civilization and culture, how do we activate or effect a notion of Islamic civilization and culture? Barakallahu fikum. I'll ask the Dr. Nadia and Dr. Medhat to
I think
unmute.
it will be a waste of time to respond, both of us, to every question. So
that's fine.
So maybe I will pick part of the questions and Dr. Medhat will pick the other part, because this is a double question. It is not just one question. ودكتور مدحت أنا سأتناول جزء صراع الحضارات وأنت المؤشرات الإجرائية، لأنك حضرتك اتكلمت على الفاعلية في هذا الأمر. بالطبع نحن من منظور حضاري إسلامي كما حاولنا أن نشرحها سريعا، نحن ضد مقولة صراع الحضارات، وكتبنا في هذا كثيرا ونشرنا في هذا كثيرا حين كان الأمر مشتدا على الساحة الفكرية والأكاديمية بعد نهاية الحرب الباردة، وعقدنا حولها منتديات كثيرة وإصداراتنا خلال هذه الفترة سواء في المركز أو في كلية الاقتصاد والعلوم السياسية من خلال مركز الدراسات الحضارية وحوار الثقافات، يعني أفاض في تناول هذا الموتو الذي استنزف طاقتنا كمفكرين وأكاديميين، كما استنزف من قبله فكرة النظام الدولي الجديد. ليس هناك صراع للحضارات وليس هناك حوار للحضارات، الصراع حالة والحوار وسيلة، ولكن ما يجب أن نقوله ونحن نؤمن بمستوى التحليل الحضاري الذي يستدعي الأمة في قلب التفاعلات الدولية سواء كمستوى للتحليل أو مكونات هذه الأمة، نحن نؤمن أنه لا يوجد صراعا دائما ولا تعاونا دائما، لا يوجد حرب دائمة ولا يوجد سلام دائم، والأهم أن الأديان في حد ذاتها ليست مصدرا للصراع، ولكن السؤال يصبح ما هي السياقات الداخلية والإقليمية والعالمية التي توظف العلاقة بين الحضارات أو الأديان أو المنتمين للأديان لتصبح صراعية، ومتى يحدث هذا وكيف يجب الوقوف أمامه.
دكتورة نادية إذا سمحتي
وبالتالي
للترجمة.
لا، كلمة أخيرة حتى أنتهي. وبدلا من هذا نقول أن رؤيتنا الحضارية تتحدث عن تعارف الحضارات والحوار الدائم بينها وبين أصحاب الأديان المختلفة. فأنا نعم ضد مقولة صراع الحضارات، وإن كانت تجلياتها واضحة بسبب السياسات الاستكبارية العالمية وسياسات قومية متطرفة.
جزاكم الله خير. Dr. Amira, please translate, and I request, inshallah, from the speakers to
part of the question, that part related to the clash of civilization and Huntington's proposition. And she says that the civilizational perspective is holding a serious attitude towards this. It's totally against this notion of clash of civilizations, and that the school has already held so many conferences and seminars discussing the issue and had so many publications on it, also in cooperation with the Center of Civilizational Dialogue at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science, and that this notion has over-exhausted intellectuals. And what she's saying is that we cannot talk about, it's not a matter of conflict between civilizations or a dialogue between civilizations. Conflict is a condition and dialogue is a tool. And we believe from a civilizational analysis perspective that neither conflicts are eternal, nor peace can be eternal, or war can be eternal, or cooperation can be eternal, and that religions as such are not the source of conflict, but the question that needs always to be addressed is what are the internal or domestic and regional and global contexts that employ religions as if they were the source of conflicts, and when does this happen and for whose interests. So just the final point is that from a civilizational Muslim perspective, we can talk about the acquaintance between civilizations and between different religions as a driver of international relations.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Amira. That was
Thank you,
absolutely
Dr. Amira.
masterful. Absolutely masterful translation. So I'm going to actually rely on you completely to undertake the translations, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, including of the questions, if you don't mind. I don't know if Dr. Medhat, if you want to add anything, or should we move to another question?
اوكي. بالنسبه لسؤال الدكتور محمد دراكة اللي هو عن تعريف اجرائي للامه والثقافه والحضاره، هو طبعا ينبغي ان تكون لنا لكل مفاهيمنا تعريفات عمليه، لكن انا اخشى ان يكون مفهوم الاجرائي ياتي على سعه مفاهيم يقصد بها يعني ان تختصر في مظاهر تجعلها يعني ايه على غير طبيعتها. ومع ذلك لابد ان نقول ان الامه تكوين بشري، يعني لن نخترع العجله. الامه تكوين بشري يفترق عن تكوينات بشريه اخرى مثل الدوله او الشعب الواحد او المجتمع في السعه وضمه لتكوينات من هذا النوع كثيره متعدده، لكن الذي يميزه هو وجود الرابط الثقافي. الرابط الثقافي هو الذي يكون أمة اسمها الأمة الإسلامية أو الأمة الصينية أو ما إلى ذلك. تتقاطع بعض هذه الأشياء الابتدائية مع هنتنجتون لا تعني الموافقة على طرحه لا في منطلقاته ولا في منتهى إليه، لكن هناك في هذا العالم إلى جوار الأمم وإلى جوار الأشياء الدول وإلى جوار الأشياء الأصغر من الدول هناك تكوينات تضم دولا متعددة، وعلى رأسها هذه الأمة يعني المصرة على رابطتها العقيدية والثقافية. الثقافة يعني ذلك المجموع المكون من قيم وأفكار أو تصورات، جزء منها تشترك فيه الأمم، تشترك فيه الشعوب والمجتمعات، وجزء منها له خصوصيته، وهذه أمور مشاهدة. يعني يمكن أن تتحول بقى إجرائيا إلى شواهد ومشاهد من القيم العالمية ومن القيم الإسلامية ذات الخصوصية، من القيم العالمية التي يشترك فيها المسلمون مع غيرهم، والقيم الإسلامية التي لا يشترك المسلمون فيها مع غيرهم، وهكذا. الحضارة هي ذلك الكل المركب من مجالات الحياة، وهذا تعريف عند الحضاريين من المؤرخين ومن الفلاسفة والمفكرين عبر التاريخ، أن هناك شيء يضم السياسي إلى الاقتصادي إلى الثقافي إلى الاجتماعي، لا يتركها هكذا متناثرة جزرا منعزلة، لأنها في حقيقة الحياة ليست منعزلة، متداخلة وبينها يعني تغذية متبادلة بشكل كبير. الذي يريد أن يرى السياسي إلى جوار أو إلى متداخلا مع الاقتصادي والثقافي يمتلك ساعتها منظورا يسمى بالمنظور الحضاري، فقط مؤشرات ذلك كما أقول شواهد من الواقع والتاريخ لا حصر له. أتمنى أن يكون التعريف واضحا.
بارك الله فيكم. أنا أسأل الأساتذة الكرام أن تختصروا يعني من ناحية يعني أن تقولوا مختصرا ثم تترجم ثم تزيد مختصرا تترجم حتى يكون هناك تفاعل مع بارك الله فيكم دكتورة أبو سمرة.
Dr. Medhat has been answering the question related to an operational definition of the Ummah, of culture and civilization, and he mentioned that each definition should have a practical component, but this does not mean that we should resort to operationalization in the positivist sense. The Ummah in that sense is a human formation that differs from many other human formations like the state and others because it's expansive and it has a wide scope. And the main thing that distinguishes the Ummah is this cultural tie that links all of its members to each other. So we can speak about a Muslim Ummah or a Chinese Ummah and so on. So we have some intersections with Huntington's proposal, but this does not mean that we agree with him because the Ummah insists on its doctrinal tie that links all of its members. Culture is a set of values and ideas. Some of them are of a particular nature, some of them are common among different cultures, but the particularity remains a component of the definition of cultures. Civilization is also a complex entity that includes all the aspects of human life, including the political, the economic, and the social, and that does not consider them to be isolated from one another. So the one who wishes to look at the political as interrelated with the cultural and the economic is one who is in possession of a civilizational perspective.
Thank you.
And to all our guests. Mashallah, as I say, I'm going to request that we have a shortened this is, I leave it to the discretion of the speakers and Dr. Abu Samra as well, if you prefer the model that you've established now. But it just means that the other listeners may be not be able to keep up quite as much, inshallah. نحن نحاول أن نختصر الترجمة إن شاء الله يكون هناك تجاوب مع السائلين إن شاء الله. Dr. Muhammad Hass is asking, and I'm going to just read the English and rely on yourself, Dr. Abu Samra, to translate. Salam, thanks for these insights. We now speak of one global civilization in which the Islamic Ummah is one contributor. Maybe this is the way the world is heading, especially that we are connected with the world in such profound ways, and thus our talk of the Ummah has to be based on a globalist perspective. This is in a sense maybe, and he adds to this in Arabic, هل يمكن أن نتحدث عن حضارة عالمية واحدة الآن والأمة فرع من فروعها لنتجنب الانعزالية والانغماس في الدورة الإنسانية. هو ترجمة, so it's fine. So that was from Muhammad Hass from Rome. Please, الأساتذة إن شاء الله. دكتورة نادية إذا أحببتي أن
I will try in a summit way.
بارك الله فيك. بارك الله.
حضارة عالمية واحدة، نعم، بدون أن تفرض حضارة مشاركة فيها أحاديتها عليها وتدعي أن قيمها أو منظومتها هي أساس هذه العالمية. هذه قضية أخرى أثيرت وطرحت كثيرا، واليونسكو تعرضت لها بمؤتمرات عديدة لمحاولة تحقيق ما يسمى في المجتمعات أو على مستوى المجتمع الدولي what is called multiculturalism. لكن مشاركة الحضارات في إطار من التنوع والتعدد في تقديم منتجها إلى العالم ليكون مكونا ذو ندية بعضها مع بعض، هذا يكون أقبل أن تكون الأمة مشاركة في هذا الأمر، وإن كانت الأمة مدعوة وفق رسالتها للعالمين أن تدعو العالمين لهذه الرسالة، ليس لاعتناق الإسلام كدين، ولكن لمنظومة قيمها العالمية التي تحقق العدالة والإنسانية. فإذا كان هذا الحال متوفر، ولكن في ظل الأحادية والاستكبار والاستعلاء من الحضارة الغربية أولا، ونخشى أيضا مما قد يحدث من الحضارة الصينية في حال تغلبها، ومن الحضارة السلافية في حال تغلب القوة الروسية، فمما لا شك فيه أن القائم هو القوى العسكرية والسياسية تفرض تغلبا يقال أنه حضاريا عالميا وليس العكس. ففي فرق كبير ما بين الجلوبال and universal. What is global maybe will not be universal، لأن معنى العالمية فيه الإرادة، فيه الطوعية، فيه الانتشار الطبيعي لمنظومة قيم للعالم دون فرضها قسرا.
So Dr. Nadia is acknowledging the possible existence of one global civilization, but under the condition that not one single civilization imposes its own value systems upon others, claiming that they are universal in nature, and that this issue has been discussed by the UNESCO and other global conferences or international conferences under the title of multiculturalism at the global societal level. So she accepts the Muslim civilization to participate in this dialogue on a global civilization, but under conditions of plurality, diversity, and parity and equality. And she's also stressing the fact that the Muslim Ummah has a mission and has a role because it is the carrier of a Muslim message, and it has the responsibility to transmit this message of the Muslim value system to everyone. And the Muslim value system is asking for a more just and a more humane world. What she's afraid of is that under current conditions of claims of superiority, whether by the Western civilization or possibly by the Chinese civilization or even the Slavic civilization, one of these civilizations might impose its own perception of what is a value system. So she's again stressing the fact that voluntary acceptance of values and the natural spread of values is what makes real global civilization possible.
بارك الله فيكم. دكتور مدحت, I don't know إذا كان لديك. بارك الله فيكم. Okay, so as Dr. Nadia had suggested, you can choose between the questions, inshallah.
Yes, this is better.
بارك الله فيكم.
So,
Jazakallah khairan. And we have around 20 to 25 minutes left, bi'idhnillah. And so we do encourage people to ask their questions, but we apologize if we're not able to get to all of them, inshallah. So I just want to highlight a comment from Dr. Hashim Muhammad Sulaiman, who's saying this type of lecture needs to be popularized globally. And يجب أن يكون مثل هذه المحاضرات لها شعبية عالمية. فإنشاءالله we hope that we can contribute to this through these. نحن نرجو ذلك كذلك. So Imad Gharaiba has the following question. He says in Arabic, جزاكم الله خيرا لكل المحاضرين على هذه المحاضرة السياسية يعني خير الجزاء. سؤالي هو كيف يمكن تفعيل دور الأمة الحضاري عمليا للتغيير السياسي، وقد يكون داخلي أو خارجي في العالم الإسلامي، الذي لا بد منه لإتمام النهضة المنشودة والتغيير العملي السياسي، أي تحقيق التكامل بين المجهودين الحضاري والسياسي. سؤال ما شاء الله. I'll just very quickly translate it. So Imad Gharaiba is thanking the two presenters and saying that how can we activate or effectuate the role of the Ummah, the civilization of the role of the Ummah in creating political change that is which is absolutely essential for completing the overall renaissance that is desirable in changing the political reality or political action and to complete or mutually complement the political with the civilizational.
Thank you, Dr. Medhat. This is the core of your
هذا
lecture.
لكم.
شكرا أستاذتنا. هو يعني إعمالا لكلام الدكتور أسامة في الاختصار، رؤيتنا لهذه المسألة هي نابعة من المنظور، وهو أن منظورا حضاريا للسياسة ييسر كثيرا من المسارات ويعالج كثيرا من المشكلات. باختصار شديد أن المنظور الذي نتعامل به في الشأن السياسي في حالة التدافع سواء من الأنظمة أو من التكوينات الأخرى كثير منه هو مأخوذ من الغرب بالمعنى المضيق للسياسي، وهذه أزمة الأنظمة مع الحركات الإسلامية التي ربما هي خارجة عن هذا الاختيار. يعني الأحزاب القومية والأحزاب الليبرالية في عالمنا العربي والإسلامي هي تكرار للأنظمة، ومن ثم فالتدافع بينها أشبه بالصفر. التدافع الحضاري الذي يعني أخذت به بعض الحركات ذات المرجعية الإسلامية أحدث إشكالا أكبر من الإشكال السياسي الصغير ومجرد تغيير أنظمة الحكم. ثم أعتقد أن استمرار هذا التدافع بالأرضية الحضارية يعني باستصحاب الثقافي والاجتماعي والعلاقة بين الداخلي والخارجي، يعني سيحلحل المسائل مع الوقت، وهذه سنن وأقدار في النهاية.
جزاكم الله خيرا على اختصاركم دكتورة أميرة. لكن اختصاري المقصود يعني أن يكون إن شاء الله تجاوب هو I leave it to both of you to use your judgment how you wish to answer. So I don't لا أملي عليكم شيئا يعني أنتم على رأسي بارك الله فيكم.
So from a civilizational perspective, from an Islamic civilizational perspective of what is political, there are so many multiple routes that can be tackled or can be used in order to solve this problem, because much of the problem relates to how we deal with the political, with a narrow definition of political taken from a Western understanding of what is political. And this is actually the reason why our political regimes have so many problems and difficulties with Islamic movements, because Islamic movements are not working on the same definition, are not acting on the same definition of what is political. They are counter-checking in the civilizational sense, or tadafa, they are practicing tadafa in the civilizational sense. So the only solution possible is just to keep on pushing and trying to balance different oppositional forces through a process of tadafa at the political, economic, and social levels in order to create some change.
Jazakallah khairan. So the next question, and we're getting a good number of questions. This is in English, and I'll leave it to you, Dr. Amira, to translate, inshallah. If you can look at the question tab. So the problem is not, this is a combination of comment and question. The problem is not just with the current regimes. There is a trickle-down effect that involves the whole system and what is holding it up, including but not limited to armies and security forces. If the regimes cannot be dismantled, how can the Ummah realize its full potential? What should our focus be on? It's a very important question, inshallah.
There is a trickle-down effect between, just repeat this tiny part, please, Dr. Osama.
Afwan, you don't have access to the Q&A in the, okay, I apologize. So there is a trickle-down effect that involves the whole system and what is holding it up, including but not limited to the armies and security forces. If the regimes cannot be dismantled, how can the Ummah realize its full potential? What should our focus be on?
اوكي سو السؤال بيسأل عن ازاي انه ان المشكله الحقيقه القائمه مش فقط في النظم السياسيه اللي موجوده، ولكن ان هناك يعني منظومه كامله موجوده في العالم من حولنا، وبالتالي كيف يمكن احداث تغيير يحتاج الى تغيير على المستوى العالمي وليس فقط على مستوى النظم الداخليه.
كان أيضا ربما أزيد على هذا، وأيضا أرسلت بالشات إذا أحببتي، لكن هناك توجيه للجيوش وال يعني أجهزة الأمن خاصة، وكيف يعني نحقق حل هذه يعني مؤسسات وأين يكون تركيزنا، يعني هل يكون على الأجهزة الأمنية أو على العلم؟
على العالم. I can take it. I can take it. It is a complex questions and very difficult to answer in a minute. In a minute. But I will try. I will try in Arabic, because it is easy for me to think in Arabic more than in English. Okay. المنظور الحضاري يأخذ بأمرين. العلاقة بين الداخل والخارج لا يمكن فصلها. الداخل طبيعته تمتد إلى الخارج، والخارج بطبيعته يؤثر على الداخل، ومن ثم لا يمكن القول أن شعوبنا أو دولنا وهي تعيش في عالم كما شرح دكتور مدحت، عالم التواصل الاجتماعي بمنأى عن تأثيرات الخارج، ولا دولنا وهي مختلفة الدرجات في القوة والتبعية تعيش مستقلة عن الخارج. فهذا واقع، هذا واقع لا يمكن إنكاره. ولكن الأمر الثاني في المنظور الحضاري أنه لا يمكن إحداث تغيير في العلاقة مع الخارج إلا ابتداء من الداخل، ابتداء من الداخل. والتاريخ يقول لنا هذا، يقول حين كانت دولنا خلافتنا قوية قدرت على أن تواجه التهديدات والتحديات طول تاريخها، ولكن حين بدأ الضعف من الداخل وهو متعدد المستويات، قوة اقتصادية واجتماعية وضعف عقدي بدأ تغلب الخارج عليه، وبالتالي فلا يمكن أن يحدث إلا إذا بدأ تغيير في الداخل يقف بمنع رغم اختلالات توازن القوة أمام الخارج، كما يحدث أمامنا في نموذج غزة الآن. يعني الوقوف أمام القوي جدا الذي لا يقهر ممكن في الخارج ورفضه. لكن الأمر الثاني الخاص بالمؤسسات الأمنية والعسكرية الداخلية، الاقتتال الداخلي شر لا بد من تجنبه بأي طريقة من الطرق، لأنه ممول ومحرك من الخارج وللاستفادة منه. فحال المنطقة العربية خلال 13 عاما الماضية خير دليل على هذا. تحولت الثورات بفعل تدخلات خارجية إلى اقتتال داخلي، يرتفع فيه المذهب، يرتفع فيه القوم، يرتفع فيه الدين، يرتفع فيه الإيديولوجيا علماني ولا إسلامي، ترتفع فيه كل هذه الأمور، فنأكل بعضنا بعضا. فالتدافع في تغيير النظم الأمنية والنظم العسكرية قد يأخذ وقتا، ولكنه ولكن لا أقول إنه الأسلم، ولكن أقول بمقتضى الرؤية الحضارية والرؤية حتى الشرعية هو الأقدر على تجنب تدخل الخارج واستغلاله لهذا الأمر. اقتتال المسلمين فيما بينهم ليس مرغوبا على الإطلاق. الخروج على الحاكم بالقوة المسلحة له شروط، ولكن الخروج عليه لرفض ظلمه والمطالبة بتغيير ومعارضة حقيقية هذا حق من مشروع. استعنا بأمريكا على صدام حسين، واستعنا بالناتو على القذافي، واستعنا مش عارفة بمين على بشار الأسد، والأمور يعني فلت عقالها. لا يعني أن دول أخرى في حال أفضل، ولكن تحتاج إلى تدافع أكثر من أجل تغيير جذري تدريجي إصلاحي. هذا هو منطق الرؤية الحضارية الإسلامية.
So Dr. Nadia is highlighting that this is a very complex question and that it is not easy to answer briefly, but basically the civilizational perspective has the claim or has this assumption that the relationship between what is external and what is internal cannot be that the external and the internal cannot be separated from each other, and that the external is just a continuation of what is happening outside, and what's happening outside is impacting what's happening inside. So she's saying that neither peoples nor states in this world of mass communication can be isolated from external forces or external impact. Not even the states that are quite powerful or with varying degrees of power. But the civilizational paradigm sees that changing the relationship with the outside world cannot happen unless we start from within our systems and states. And because at the time when our states and our caliphate systems were very powerful or were powerful, they managed somehow to confront what's happening outside and to confront external forces. And when they became weak means doctrinally weak, economically weak, politically weak, and so on, they were subject to interventions from the outside. So she's stressing that change from inside is the way to fight back against external invincible forces even, and that Gaza is giving us, setting this example for all of us. The second part of the question relating to the institutions or the military institutions, she highlighted the fact that domestic fighting is an evil that should be avoided by every possible means, because it is usually motivated or driven and even financed by external powers. And our Arab region gives us a very good example when revolutions shifted from being calls for freedom into civil wars in which no one pays attention to ideologies, nationalism, religion, or anything else, and in which people ended up exterminating each other. So what she's suggesting is that tadafa, is that check balancing each other, is the only possible way of bringing about change. It might take some time, but it is the best way to avoid being exploited by external forces. She thinks that opposing rulers by the use of force has very limited, has its conditions, and these conditions are very strict. But opposing rulers and asking for change by peaceful means is the best way to proceed politically. She gave the example of asking for the help of the US against Saddam and NATO against Gaddafi and others in Syria, and that this ended up with huge disasters everywhere. So tadafa is the only possible way to bring about gradual change and reform.
I'm going to try and bring sets of questions together. سأحاول أن أجمع بين بعض الأسئلة لأن الوقت يداهمنا. Dr. Jukaku Tayyib asks a very short question, but very broad question. Did some monarchies actively undermine the Arab Spring? هل يعني عمل بعض يعني ملوك ضد الربيع العربي? And a second question, which I'll bring in here, is in as few words as possible, how is the Islamic Civilizational School different from other prevalent schools of political thought? يعني كيف تختلف المدرسة الحضارية الإسلامية من مدارس أخرى في علم السياسة أو نظريات السياسة? And how could this better help us better understand political phenomena? كيف تساعد في فهم الظواهر السياسية؟ بارك الله فيكم. كما تحبون، يعني من يبدأ؟
سأخذ السؤال الأول والسؤال الثاني تاخده يا دكتور مدحت. بس I will take the first question about the interfering of some monarch against the
الربيع العربي.
الصوت الربيع
عفوا أصبحت صامتة. لا نسمعك دكتورة نادية. عفوا.
Yes, my question is yes, in short, without details, because we know it. And what is more important, that according to different models in the contemporary world politics or in history, the regional context is very important for the success or the failure of revolution of whatever people movement. and the regional and the international context was not favor for Arab revolution in the 2011. And the symptoms are different, and the indicators are different. And there is a lot of study about this. And thank you.
جزاك الله خيرا. تفضل دكتور مدحت.
بالنسبة للسؤال الثاني عن اختلاف مدرسة المنظور الحضاري مع المدارس السياسية الأخرى. طبعا هذا يعني إيه سؤال مهم بسرعة شديدة. إن كان المقصود المدارس السياسية الإسلامية فهي رقم واحد السمة الأساسية في مدرسة المنظور الحضاري أنها مدرسة علمية، يعني ليست مدرسة حركية. من ثم فمقارنتها مثلا بالإخوان أو مقارنتها بالتيارات السياسية السلفية أو ما إلى ذلك قد يصعب اختلاف النوع. الأمر الثاني المدارس العلمية السياسية في العالم العربي والإسلامي التي تمارس العلم ليست تمارس الحركة أكثرها للأسف حتى الآن هي مدارس مترجمة، فهي أصداء للأصوات الغربية سواء كانت مدارس قومية أو ليبرالية أو بقايا ماركسية. حتى على المستوى المنهاجي ظلت فترة طويلة سلوكية، وانعتقت بعد السلوكية إلى يعني مجموعة يعني نثر من المناهج العولمية، ولم تصل حتى إلى المرحلة ما يسمى بمدرسة النقدية أو يعني التيار النقدي. أيضا للأسف عدنا يعني ذهبنا إليه ونحن نترجمه وهو أصلا تيار ضد الترجمة. بقي أن أقول أن مدرسة المنظور الحضاري هي مدرسة قادمة من العلوم الاجتماعية الحديثة، ذهبت إلى أصولها وأخذت ما جدد فيها على يد المفكرين والفقهاء، وليست هي التي تمارس الفقه، وليست بالضرورة تحل محل المفكرين، لكي تجدد هذه العلوم وتجدد بها ما استطاعت. نقطة.
بارك الله فيكم، جزاكم الله خيرا على اختصاركم جميعا يعني. وبقي تقريبا 5 دقائق، فإن شاء الله أنا أستسمح يعني الحاضرين لأسئلتهم، لن يعني نتمكن من الإجابة عن جميعها. I apologize in advance to many of the attendees who unfortunately in the remaining 5 minutes we won't be able to really address them or do justice to them, but I will read through elements of them. عفوا, forgive me, Dr. Amira. Please, Dr. Amira.
Dr. Muhammad, can we get this question?
Usama.
Yes. Dr. Usama, can we get these questions and we will reply written and send it to all the guests to not let the occasion be left.
It's very kind of you. I will try my best to make a record of them so that we can send them to you.
We can do it, inshallah.
Dr. Amira, forgive me, I cut you off, so please go ahead.
The English answer of Dr. Nadia too? Do I need to translate?
No, I don't think so, because Dr. Nadia, Jazakallah khairan, she responded in English, so I don't think so.
So what concerns the question answered by Dr. Medhat related to the differences between the different schools, and he said if meant by different schools, what is meant is the different Islamic political schools. So yes, the civilizational perspective or school is different from these because it is basically a scientific school, not seeking, not in the movement sense or acting as a movement or seeking on the ground politics, so to say, like Muslim Brotherhood or the Salafi movement, for example. And as opposed to other scientific schools that already exist within the Arab and Muslim world, it also it seems to be also different because most of these schools have been just translations of Western academic and scientific products, be they liberal or Marxist or whatever, and they have been even obsessed by behavioralism for a very long time, and most of them haven't even heard about the critical perspectives in the recent critical and new perspectives in social sciences. So the civilizational school is coming in close relation and from a comparative perspective with modern contemporary social sciences. It relied on its heritage, but moved on to interact with our contemporary reality.
شكرا دكتورة.
Jazakallahu khairan. It's really, it's been an honor to have you both. I have made a note of the questions that have come, which we haven't unfortunately been able to answer. So we will send them to you. We're very grateful for your willingness to answer these. يعني فعلا نحن تشرفنا بحضوركما وحضوركم جميعا. دكتورة أميرة، يعني ترجمتك كانت رائعة، جزاك الله خيرا. فيعني نشكركم على ما قدمتم. أنا في الحقيقة سأستند إلى كلمات يعني كتبها الدكتور حازم علي ماهر، قال: جزاكم الله خيرا على هذا اللقاء المهم والذي اختصر فيه المحاضران الكريمان مئات الصفحات والعديد من الأفكار والرؤى في كلمات موجزة بليغة ودالة. بارك الله فيك. It's a beautiful statement from Dr. Hazim Ali Mahir. He said he's thanking our guests for summarizing hundreds of pages worth of thought in a very sort of concise form, and we've benefited a great deal. We're sorry to the people who've all asked so many questions, but we've noted down your questions and we will share them with the speakers. People are asking if this recording will be available on YouTube. It will be uploaded, inshallah, very soon. And with that, we come to a conclusion. I thank the whole team at Ummatics for their sort of supporting behind the scenes. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا.
Thank you very much for you and for Ummatics institution for inviting us and for this event. And I hope profoundly that it will be profitable for everyone and presenting some sort of support to our brothers and sisters in Gaza and in Dafa, inshallah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for Dr. Abdurrahman al-Rashdan. He has taken the lead for inviting us. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdurrahman. Thank you.
جزاكم الله خيرا.
دكتورة أميرة، جدا جدا يعني شكرا.
This is my love.
شكرا دكتور أسامة. شكرا. السلام عليكم
أكرمكم الله.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Dr.